Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I'm Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Lovecraft Country, Season 1, Episode 10. It's called Full Circle, and it is, of course, the season finale of Season 1. So, yeah, we'll dive into this. Endings upon endings, epilogues. It was very traditional, I thought, in terms of a finale. When I think of, obviously we compare this a lot to the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but I did feel like it had kind of a finale to that type of show vibe.
It was the most standard TV... Sorry, I'm just pouring a drink. It's the most standard TV episode of this show so far, I would say. It's not like it's a bad episode, but in a little bit of a disappointing way, it is the least unique episode of this show.
Yeah, okay, I could see that. I can see that. I don't necessarily know if this one needed to be unique per se, though.
No, I get that argument, and that's how I say it doesn't really do anything wrong. I felt, even there's a couple episodes I didn't really like earlier in the season, but all of them felt very unique, focused. This was kind of what we were doing this episode, whereas this one felt like, oh, this episode we're doing the season finale. And that kind of felt like a weird jarring back to, oh, it's a TV show, which I kind of hadn't been feeling for a lot of it.
It's the season finale episode. There you go.
No, it is, but focus. That's kind of weirdly disappointing in a way.
It's finally this ritual we've been hearing about for most of the season that we've been building up to, and the preparation from it on the hero side, with a bit of a question mark going into it. Exactly, is Ruby on the side of our characters, or is she siding with Christina? And it did leave it very ambiguous for us. At a point, and then it was like, oh, it seems she did make the right choice, but something felt a bit fishy about it.
Fishy it was.
And it's not even so much that I didn't call that Christina was pretending to be Ruby, which obviously the mythology is there to allow for that. So when it was revealed, I was like, oh shit, that's a good little twist.
It's like, of course she is, right?
Yeah, that's a great little twist. But what I thought was going on was that Ruby had genuinely decided to help, which it sounded like she did, because Christina says she caught her trying to steal her
the
last
blood. We see of Ruby, I think definitively, is her eyeing up the bottle.
Well, no, it's more ambiguous than that, because the actual end of that scene is the kiss and them about to have sex as women for the first time. So it ends kind of a place where you're like, well, she seemed like she wanted to, but then they have this romantic moment, so it's like, where is she going to fall on it? Especially since even the scene before that with Letty, she's like, no, piss off, sister, you only want to be my sister whenever you want something. But then it ends on a kind of cliffhanger, that scene, because Letty's like, there's more to tell you. And I presume she tells her about being pregnant and some other stuff. And well, actually, did she know she was pregnant? Whatever.
She knew she was pregnant, yeah.
But I'm sure she gives her more details and more about what's going on and whatever. So again, even that ending in a bit of a cliffhanger is like, oh, is she being convinced or not? So then in the next scene with Christina, you're like, is she flipped? Is she flipped to the good guys? And then you're not... So what I thought had happened was that Christina, like, very conveniently pulled out this vial. Oh, I've got some of my DNA just here. And I thought, that seems like she wants Ruby to take it. Like, it's actually part of her plan. So I thought it was still Ruby when she showed up at the car to go with them. But I thought it was like a trick in Christina's part. So Ruby thought she was helping them, but in really she was just been a pawn all along.
I did too. I thought, well, maybe, she kind of knows what they're planning, because she knows a lot of stuff, right? And not in a cheap way, just that she has always had more knowledge than them. And I thought she kind of has an idea what they're planning, and this isn't actually her DNA, and it's like, so it'll just ruin the whole plan. And then when she showed up, the bottle, when she showed up as Ruby to the car, and she shows the bottle, it's a lot more full than what we saw on the table before. And I did question that, but I kind of almost just shrugged it off. I shouldn't have done, obviously. But I did notice it, and I was like, that's weird. There's a lot more in that now, than when we saw it before. Maybe I was like, maybe she just took another bottle that, was a bigger bottle of the same stuff that she had. Maybe she has on a shelf somewhere. I don't know. But
in actual
obviously
fact,
shouldn't have just brushed it off.
In actual fact, it's the sort of thing that you can brush off and just sort of go, well, either it's a slight mistake or whatever. It's not important that it's a different amount.
It's almost small enough that it could just be a continuity error. Yeah,
but in hindsight, it's actually the writers, or perhaps even the prop masters, maybe more specifically, giving you a hint that, hey, this doesn't quite line up from before. And clearly the reason why it doesn't line up is because Christina, after she's knocked out Ruby, she says she's killed her in this scene, but it's pretty clear that she's just put her in a coma. So I think Ruby's actually going to be okay in a theoretical season 2. I think she'll, they'll get her back up And
yeah, I think the assumption, well, assuming that Christina had planned on not being caught as easily, and maybe she wanted to, be Ruby again at some point, she would need to keep Ruby alive in the same way that she has with the others.
But the idea being that she just like filled up a new vial with whoever's blood it is, or what's in there. Maybe William's blood. Who knows?
It could be Ruby's.
It could just be Ruby's blood. It could just be Pig's blood. I have no idea. It doesn't really matter. It almost makes it more disgusting that Tit Kat to drink it. Now I don't even know if it's her blood. Like who is it? Blood? Is it an animal's blood? Like why it's any more disgusting than knowing it's her blood? I don't know. There's just this unknown factor to it now that makes it even more icky than it was before.
I get where you're coming from.
If I'm going to have to drink someone's blood, I'd rather know whose blood it is rather than just here's some random crackhead's blood. What?
At least you might get high off that one.
So, now the episode opened, of course, with them doing the ritual for Diana, and it's funny. I just at the end of the episode when they revealed the arm, I flashed back to you a couple episodes ago, saying, "Well, maybe it's just an advanced prosthetic," and she pulls out this like robotic arm that's got like sound effects. And
look, in my defense, we had not seen the arm, so it was not an unreasonable comment at the time.
Well, it's worth mentioning that clearly. Hippolyta, I keep saying her name wrong. I keep trying to avoid saying the comic book one, so I end up saying it weirdly. Yeah, Hippolyta. She clearly has used her multiverse knowledge to build her this arm, and that's because there's a tease earlier on where she like goes into a room and you hear all these sounds and like flashing lights and stuff. You don't see what it is; you just see like Diana's reaction. And she also has a comic book. I saw actually the artist that she references here. I saw tweeting about this, about being name dropped on the show.
Oh, okay.
Because the artist just says taught her how to draw the comic.
Is that someone real then? Okay.
Yeah, someone real that they were referencing. I saw him tweeting about it.
I didn't recognize the name. So,
nor did I.
And given the concept of the places she went or could have theoretically gone in that episode, I did not know if this was someone real or not.
It doesn't matter if you do or not. The point is that I saw the person tweeting about it and like freaking out that they were referenced on the show. So that's a pretty neat thing. That's cool. Because she gives it what looks like a professional comic book. It looks like a finished like release comic book of like the same story that she would tell, but it was the adventures she was on. And Dia's a little bit pissed at her for kind of abandoning her, and she basically she kind of owns up to says, yeah, like I did kind of leave. I was always going to come back, but I should have came back sooner. And I got lost in the track of time in my 200 relative years of multiverse travel.
Yeah, that'll happen to you.
Which is a fun idea. I mean, it's weird to skip to there, but since we're on Diana just now, I think the hope I have for this having a planned second season is that final scene. That final scene to me says they want to do more. That feels like it's setting up like a vibe.
I agree, because the previous like 10 minutes or so before that scene, kind of building up into the ending of the season, felt like this could just be the ending of the story.
It absolutely could be. But they have this moment at the end, which, funnily enough, did actually remind me a little bit of the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I'm going to have to get specific here. But there's a moment in the season 5 finale of Buffy where we've actually brought up Ben and Glory on this show before, bizarrely enough. But there's a moment where, fairly reasonable spoilers for Buffy season 5. I'll just warn you now, right? You'll probably forget if you ever actually do watch it, but I'm just going to warn you.
For the 20-year-old episode, give or take.
Time has no meaning when it comes to spoilers. So, Gloria, like after fighting Buffy, turns back into Ben, who's human. So the idea being that you can kill Ben and it'll kill Glory, because Glory's like a god and indestructible. But when she's Ben, it's actually quite easy to just snuff him. And Buffy chooses not to because she's good and heroic and stuff. And Giles comes up and he makes a little speech, but he ultimately says, Buffy's a hero, not like us, and then just suffocates him to death. The idea being that he's willing to do the dark thing. And I actually kind of get like a weird vibe of that in this scene at the end where Diana comes up and just like, and Christina's under this rubble because they've not actually bothered killing her, they've just left her there. And Diana comes up with her pet monster, we'll talk about that in a minute, and just, so I thought obviously she's strangling Christina with a robotic arm and it's cool and neat. But again, they give me that little extra pop, and it's literally a pop.
A literal pop, yeah.
That little extra, just the neck popping as the hand crushes through the entire like throat and windpipe and whatever else.
Yeah, that is a hell of a visual.
But it does kind of set up Diana on this dark path. This is not. I mean, as much as Christina deserves this, she's been a vile human being, and like what we just saw her do to Tick, is deserving of it in and of itself. But it is kind of this dark thing where you don't want this innocent girl who we've grown to root for to begin down a dark path where she's this sort of, vengeful, murderous person. You want her to be better than that. So it is kind of this sad, bittersweet kind of moment. So I think they've definitely set stuff up for her there. And I'm cool. And as for the monster thing, I did like that we get because a lot of shows do this, and Buffy itself was guilty of this many a times, especially in its finales, is the idea of the group of main characters having a plan that we don't actually get to see all the parts of, and then it's revealed kind of in the middle of the thing or whatever. And it kind of did this here where Gia goes into, she starts having the visions of everything when she connects to everything. And one of the key points that it sort of reveals after we've had kind of the tease of it is that Tick actually made a point, because we see that the monster's in the cellar. They've got it hidden in the cellar.
You were wondering where they were keeping it.
I was wondering. But we see in this quick flashes that he's actually brought Diana to it and sort of bonded them and made sure it's comfortable with her. And the idea being that he's essentially trained it to be protector. Because they leave Dee in the car, right? She's reading the comic, or no, sorry, she's reading the Lovecraft Country book in the car with the flashlight. And I was actually thinking while she was just reading the first part of it, I was just kind of like, isn't this the same forest that those monsters were running around back in episode 1? Does this seem that safe? And sure enough, next time we see her, there's monsters attacking her. And then out of nowhere, Tick's monster jumps in and starts finding them all off, and I'm like, oh, okay, they left the guard dog. I guess it's fine.
Yeah, and again, they don't show us too much of them, the monster size, but I do think it's probably the best they've looked yet on the show. Weirdly,
yeah, really good. I thought
that shot where one kind of jumps in the window of the car and tries to get in that way.
Yeah.
Because we're looking at it head on. The CG itself looks fantastic in that moment.
Yeah, also the ending shot where Dee looks round and the monster howls the moonlight, the full moon behind it.
Does the Jurassic Park T-Rex?
I mean, I guess you can't call that. I would call this more of a werewolf moment.
No, I would as well. But just the way I think it was just the framing of it, the moment, it just reminded me of that. It was the first thing that came into my head.
Yeah, because I think one of the things we have to talk about here is that Tick, at least seemingly, has died. And I was actually thinking about this during the episode. I'm like, okay, I want a season 2, and we've talked about how they can sort of get out of Tick dying. But then as scenes kept happening this episode where he's having these moments with people, and he's getting baptized, with Letty, and he's doing these other things. He's apologizing to Gia for how he spoke to her, and he's making amends. He's leaving, and eventually we find out he leaves a letter for Montrose. All these things, I was like, this feels like he could die, and I was sort of thinking about it. I'm like, obviously, I don't want to lose him. I think Majors is a fantastic actor, and Tick's been a wonderful character on this show, and the idea of not having him does hurt. But then when I sort of say, okay, but what if we do take him out of the picture, and what if we are left with Letty and Montrose and Hippolyta and Diana as characters? And I'm like, I think Letty alone can anchor a show. Letty, she can.
No question.
Yeah.
Her acting is more than enough. To lead this, and I think I kind of like that they killed him, and not that I want the character gone, because like the character,
it's more that
he was one of the best actors on the show.
More that they had the balls to go through with it. They teased it and did it.
Exactly. It was the fact that they didn't just have some easy solution, or not even easy solution. They didn't have some literal magical solution that got them out of jail free at the end. There was no undoing it. It was like, no, sometimes shit happens.
And the death is brutal. I don't think I've ever seen someone having their arms and wrists slit quite like that with a sword. Where it's literally, do you know what it's like? It's like one of those sort of fancy water fountains or fixtures where you've just got the sort of thin, the fountain of water coming down. It's that thin layer, but it's like that of blood coming from both arms because he's sort of out in a crucifix position. And
yeah, the imagery is pretty clear.
Oh, obviously, yeah. And Christina literally showers in his blood as she's doing the incantation.
Yeah, I actually really like the way it makes her, because she's wearing a white dress, and the way it looks afterwards.
That is very intentional.
Oh, of course it is.
They picked that white dress because they knew it would have the most effect with the blood.
Yeah, I mean, and even obviously the thematic ideas, the white bride, essentially, right? It's almost like a almost plays as like a virginity thing with the way becomes red like this. There's all these things that you can kind of draw into it, but just on the sheer visual of it, the way whatever liquid they were using for the blood, the way it stuck to the dress and after looked just fantastic.
It actually almost looked like a red dress afterwards. It didn't look like a white dress that was covered red. It looked like a red dress by the time it was done.
It did, and I mean, maybe they did just have a red dress, and that's how they got around this, and just kind of made it wet, a wet red dress. But and maybe that's why it looks so good. But if it was, the blood, whatever they were using, looked incredible.
Yeah, the Ruby reveal I did think worked really well. It's one of those things where the second it happens, it kind of feels like, of course that's Christina pretending to be Ruby.
I think they did a good job of making you not question, because I say there's that moment where she comes up to the car that you start going, oh, is that a bit weird with when she pulls out the vial, but then immediately after you have that scene in the car where they're all singing, and she's one of the first ones singing along. And so it kind of eases you into, no, she's part of the group. The dynamic's there. It's fine. Everything's normal. It just kind of resets. That's
the moment. That's the moment that convinces you that maybe she is just Ruby and it's okay. Like, when they're all having that happy scene in the car. And if anything, that was a scene that maybe go, Tick's dead. I was like, they're too happy. They're having too much of a happy time. Tick is so dead.
Do you know what? If it hadn't got towards the end where... Because, you've got all the ones in the back singing along.
It's Montrose. You're watching
and the
Montrose.
front three. Because even Tick's a bit like, oh, whatever. And then you got Letty and Montrose kind of both just looking stone-faced forward, doing nothing. It's once the pair of them break, it's like, oh god, this is it. It's all over.
Well, no, because it's very specifically Montrose's last, because you say the front three are all just completely stone faced, and then Tick and Letty, one after the other, join in, and it's when Tick, because Letty joins in first, and then Tick starts kind of singing a little bit, and it's when he starts singing, if you're looking at Montrose's face closely, you can see that the stone face look starts to kind of crack a smile, just a little bit of a smile.
It just can't help himself.
And then it's at that point, eventually, of course, they're all singing, and it's this big happy moment. Because obviously we have this thing earlier on where Christina, in a act of rage, when Tick won't give her the book of names because they find out. Because we didn't even mention they have to conjure up Tidus and steal a bit of flesh, so we get Tick and him fighting with the spirits. I mean, and this is the thing, because we're dealing with magic, it's the real ancestor, it's his real mother, it's it's all these real people in his family helping with this, and we see them. And I thought the scene where he met her for the first time when they're doing the spell for Diana, because that's when they first sort of interact with the characters, because
they kind of just drop unconscious and get brought into the spirit realm.
I laughed actually a little bit when this scene played out, because I thought the acting was phenomenal. I love that he didn't say mum, because because he eventually says mama when he's crying and saying I don't want to die, and it was fine in the context of that moment, but all I could think about was Barry seeing his mum in the Speed Force for the 10th time on The Flash, and I'm so glad that I knew who this was without a word spoken. He just looked at her and I knew who it was, because we haven't been seeing photos of her all season. It's not like
We've seen her maybe once or twice.
Yeah, Barry's mum in The Flash, there's constant flashbacks to the night she died, there's constant photographs, there's constant reminders. This was just the way Tick looked at her, I knew who it was. It hit. And then everything about him saying he doesn't want to die and crying in her lap, all wonderful, all good stuff. But that's so at one point Tidus teleports to Christina, and that's how she finds out they've got the book. And she goes to try and get it, and when they don't give her it, even though she says, "Oh, maybe I'll find a way of doing my spell without your blood, because I've got the book now." If you give it to me,
I almost believe her that she would try. I mean, I'm not sure that she'd succeed, but I believe that she was willing to try.
Willing to try, but for how long until she says, "Well, I guess it's back to plan A."
I mean, she would have tried right up until this ritual had to be completed. Right?
That's true. Yeah, that's right. There was a time stamp on it. You're right. But she sort of takes away the immortality, or not immortality, I keep saying that with
invulnerability.
Invulnerability spell, yes.
I think there is an important distinction in this case, because immortality is what she's after.
Yeah, that's what she wants at the end, because she has the invulnerability, but she's still growing old and dying eventually, presumably.
Yes.
And that's what she's trying to fix. So there's this thing where, so now Letty's vulnerable, and then, when she does reveal, when Ruby reveals to be Christina, and Letty tests her with a little bit of, just saying something that didn't happen, and Ruby sort of pretends to know what she's talking about, and the fight breaks out. And I think we have to acknowledge the imagery, because as this is happening, the other characters are being essentially, there's a lynch mob coming for them with pitchforks and shit.
Yeah, I think this was possibly one of my least favorite moments of the episode, and where it felt the most, where I felt it being a TV show. I felt the we have to have the action here.
I thought it was fine for Hippolyta because we'd seen her literally training in like almost Roman style combat in like her episode in the multiverse. It was a bit weird seeing Gia like throwing like kicks and stuff. I thought, okay,
I just didn't feel like
weird.
the Letty Christina / Ruby fight. Absolutely, fantastic. That was this big personal thing between these characters. But then I felt like we were cutting to the others just because we needed the other characters to have some action. I didn't feel there was a real purpose to it.
Yeah. I don't think these are real living people. I got the impression this was all the ancestors of all the servants and stuff, or not servants.
I think so. Yeah, something like that.
This was all magically stuff. But I think the imagery is important. All of this imagery, of course, even just the idea of sacrificing the black man for her to get her immortality. All of that is important from a thematic point of view. But yeah, so during this fight with Ruby and Letty, though, or let's say Christina as Ruby versus Letty, where it's like, okay, she's actually could get her here, and she's pregnant, and she keeps getting punched and kicked. This can't be good, and she falls off this tower they're in, and
there was a moment beforehand, like near the start of the fight, where Christina says, Ruby made a promise not to hurt Letty specifically.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting because it's like, what leverage did Ruby have at that point where Christina's obviously taking over and and be like, all right, okay, I'm taking over you as your body now.
What are you talking about? What are you talking about? That promise was from before.
Oh, I thought it was another one.
No,
okay.
No. She's just referring to the promise we saw.
Oh, fair enough. I thought it was like, I thought in Christina's mind that had kind of almost expired by this point.
No, I think she's just referencing that, but then saying this decision to try and help you now is what's leading to your death.
Sure. Okay.
And of course, I'm expecting, because it would have been a hell of a twist if Tick somehow survived, but Letty was the one who died, which would be really dark because she's the one with the kid, right? But this extra dark tinge to it. But Letty, of course, wakes up and we see the symbol, and you're like, wait, why has she got the symbol? And this is another thing that when we get these quick flashes of all these things they've done to prepare, we see before the book got taken. They used it, they used it to give her the spell back, which is really something. And I love that they can't do that with Tick, even though it would why not just make him invulnerable? Because no, he has to connect with her for the spell that they're trying to do a counter spell, and that's why he needs the flesh of Tyrus and Christina. They all have to be connected. Well, they're going to do this counter spell, which ultimately is going to lock magic away from white people, because that's what kind of Diana sort of really makes clear in the last scene. Which I think is an interesting premise for season 2, and if this is something where Diana does go down a dark path with the use of magic, what is that ultimately,
I mean, I hate to bring it up, but I can see the Buffy parallel already.
You mean it's like a drug and you can go too far with magic and become power mad?
Yeah. It's not like they did a very similar plot with one specific character or anything. God damn it.
I think the dangers of what you can do with power, in this case, magic being that power, I think is a fascinating angle for it to go down. And
I think it would be interesting, the idea that, okay, it's all well and good they locked white people out of it, but they're not, it doesn't make them inherently good either, and they're not inherently deserving of this level of power either. It's a person by person basis, presumably. It's kind of the conclusion they're going to come to.
Oh yeah, it's going to be dangerous in anyone's hands, really, but. Yeah. But it's a powerful thing, a statement to do at the end of the show. The idea of them taking power literally from the evil white people. It kind of ties into the themes of the whole show, and there's some interesting things to play with that going forward. I do think it's very exciting that Gia seems to have found kind of a group of friends out of these characters. She seemed to kind of when Tick goes to apologize and then she kind of becomes part of the fold. They see her. I mean, Montrose is knocked out at this point, but they see her use her succubus tentacles to
tails. Yeah. I feel like, while I get where you're coming from, I don't really see her as part of the group. I don't feel like there's enough with her bonding with anyone really.
Okay, part of the group might be a strong statement, but what I mean is I don't think she's just going to disappear and never be seen again. I think. Maybe she'll be gone for a while, but I feel like she can be an ally that they call upon. That there's maybe kind of an acceptance and understanding, where I can see Letty even being the one who reaches out to her first if they ever need her for something. Like, she's the one who goes to her because they both share a love for Tick. There's maybe a bonding there in some capacity over that. It doesn't just feel like, oh, she's this awful third party now that I hate because, like, I'm jealous or
no, I
whatever.
think that isn't there anymore. That animosity is definitely not there.
And even some
respect, almost. I guess the word I'd use.
Respect, some level of acceptance of what she is as well, because they've seen it and seen her use it for the good of
that she's not inherently evil because of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, that's also a big part of Buffy, the idea that just because you were a demon, that didn't mean that you were inherently bad, right?
Yeah. God damn it.
Hey,
do you know what? I hate that Misha Green's obviously such a big fan of Buffy because it gives you all this just easy material and it's shit.
Look, science fiction, horror, fantasy, all these things have always been used as metaphors to talk about these types of subjects. This show is obviously going one step further, and it's actually putting the actual real life part of it into the show as well.
Yes.
So it's mixing with the metaphors, but this is why it can be compared to Buffy, which is just a really good example of this being done previously in a very similar type of horror fantasy style thing.
Yeah, on TV, all these sort of things. I agree, the parallels are there, and like I say, this is what these genres have always done, or at least when they're done properly. All of the good examples do this.
Yeah, so Tick leaves a letter for Montrose saying that he's got a chance to become a better father as a grandfather to his son. And we hear this read out as they're carrying him away from Ardham. It's it's this really sad kind of moment where they've kind of won, they've defeated the evil, but it came at a cost. And it wouldn't surprise me if we still see, even if Tick is truly dead and doesn't come back, although I'm still kind of suspecting they might find a way to have him come back properly. But even if he doesn't,
parallel worlds.
Yeah, if he doesn't come back full time though, I can still see him, because just like in this episode we saw the ancestors like pop up to help in magical circumstances. Like he could easily be someone, if they call upon the book to come help with something. He could easily be one who pops up. It's not unfeasible. So that makes sense.
I'm not worried going forward without him. I think earlier in the show, it was very reliant on him and Letty together. I think over the course of the season, we brought in Montrose, especially, I think, is the next big part of it. Because obviously it was George for the first few episodes, but then Montrose over the course has kind of grown into that third role. And obviously we've got Hippolyta and Dee kind of on the fringe. Both are much more interesting than they were, but neither are quite, in terms of, anchoring the show. I don't think either of them are there just yet, even though both had individually a good, very good episode each. But I think the fact that we did so much with Montrose in the back half has left it okay. Him and Letty are enough to anchor while we build the others up to that level.
Yeah, I think even just their one episodes each story, even just this, like the idea of Hippolyta having all this knowledge now, the idea of Diana having this change of character as well as the fancy robotic arm, but more the change of how she thinks and her sort of almost very dark coming of age, kind of rude, this abrupt growing up she's had to do in the last couple of episodes through all this horrific experience. I think that sets them up nicely to become major characters in season 2 if they weren't already considered that.
I think they are technically major characters already. I just mean in terms of the way we care about Tick and Letty and Montrose, I think, more than we do about anyone else. But by nature of the time we've spent on those
but what I'm saying is that distinction's going to blur, and it won't matter that much as time goes on, probably.
No, that was kind of what I was getting at before, that I think they're in a good place going forward, that while we build up those into that same category, I think Letty and Montrose are enough for the first half of season 2, for example, until we're at that stage with everyone else as well.
Yeah. And of course, there's the room for a new character or two to be added to the mix, to be major characters. It would surprise me if they didn't, to be honest.
We'll need probably some outward antagonistic villain while we build up the kind of going down the dark path as well.
I mean, assuming she actually ends up being the villain. I'm not necessarily jumping to that conclusion.
No, me
perhaps,
either. But it's it's clearly toying with her going down a darker path, at least, and that's obviously not enough to anchor your season around just yet. You need some sort of antagonist, I think, at least in the first half of the season, if nothing else.
I suspect we might just get some regular human antagonists. I mean, I say regular, I mean like not necessarily like a warlock or wizard or whatever. Just like, like the corruption, like maybe like some chief of police. I know we already killed the one we had, but like,
but more, in a more real world sense.
Yeah, something like that.
That's possible.
So there's lots of things they could do with that. I think it is totally open for a season 2. I mean, not only do I think it's kind of like setting some stuff up for it, but it just feels ripe for more stories.
It does. I do appreciate that. On the off chance there is no season 2, for whatever reason, it doesn't get renewed. Maybe they don't actually want to do a season 2. They were just setting up the tease of what if, because I've seen that before. They left it in a satisfying place where if there is no more, while I'll be disappointed that we don't get to see more stuff, it left it in a place where no, that was a solid ending still. So I can appreciate that.
Oh yeah, no, it was for sure, and yeah, I think I'm feeling hopeful. I think it's got a lot of buzz online, and I don't see why they wouldn't want to. So
no, I don't either. I don't think it's any more expensive than some of the other shows HBO does.
Oh, not at all. If anything, I'm pretty sure this is definitely cheaper than Westworld, and maybe.
Oh, absolutely. I think the most expensive part will be because a lot of it feels like it is filmed outside, and it looks reasonably authentic in the time period. So that'll be kind of some of the more expensive side of it, I guess.
I think the question I'd have for next season, unless it's all set really soon, as in we're not jumping that far ahead at all, so she's still pregnant, is are we going to have a baby, or is there going to be a time jump to when the kid's a little bit older? So, because let's say it takes a couple of years to make season 2, because with the world, and sometimes it just takes that long anyway these days for these like premium cable shows. Do we, let's say it's 2 or 3 years till we get season 2. Do they give it a 5-year jump and the kid's like 5, say? And that would also explain why Diana looks, like almost 20, probably, by the time they get to shooting it.
Yeah, realistically, it's probably going to be at least 2 years for another season, even if it's renewed right now, which, obviously, as we're recording this, I don't think it has been. At least to my knowledge, it hasn't been renewed yet. But, it's with everything going on, these shows at the minute on HBO are taking 15 to 18 months anyway. Everything's kind of slow at the moment. I'd expect 2 years from now before we're seeing a second season.
I can see a time jump to when the kid's already, not like super old, but just old enough that it's not like there's a baby in a crib that they have to constantly protect. Like, I can see it, but someone who's old enough to talk, someone who can, like, not have like I don't expect a 5-year-old to have like a big character arc. He's still going to essentially be more of a plot device they have to protect or something, but it's definitely a lot more manageable than a baby, I think. But again, who knows? Maybe they've got stuff they want to do.
Yeah. It depends. It depends how much, especially with like in this particular case, you might want to show some of that earlier stuff with Montrose.
Yeah. It's sort of thing though. They could do like one episode sort of flashing back to the baby times. It's not like it's not like this show hasn't done like episodes focusing on when the whole episode in Korea was like, hey, let's go look at this period of time. So I could totally see that happening. Otherwise, like I'd be fascinated to see what sort of villains they do. Do they go bigger? I mean, do they actually go all out? Maybe if not season 2, maybe at some point do they do like some sort of Cthulhu level thing where it's not a human villain? There's some monster coming from another realm.
I think I'd appreciate that actually.
It'd be different.
Just to switch it up. Yeah.
It would be different. Maybe season 1 you've got this this evil witch essentially, right, coming from the White family. It would do all that stuff. Season 2, you have the idea that maybe one of our main characters is tempted too much by the power and goes down a dark path, and that's kind of what season 2's plot is. I wonder if how you sort of, let's say it's a 3-season show, like how do you cap it off? Well, season 3, freaking Cthulhu is coming, and they have to actually save the world from a monster that's coming from an apocalyptic, Earth or dimension or space or whatever. I think. Just ballparking a rough idea. Obviously, I'll leave it to the writers to actually think all this shit.
You could even do kind of an idea of, if you want to play this idea of we do a lot of like human villains in season 2 while we do like the D stuff. You could kind of play up the idea that something is coming and it's actively making people worse, like just the effect it has.
Oh, okay.
So it ramps up even beyond the horror that is the real world level it's already at in that time period. It's more frequent. People get worse. And it's it's because of the impact of this Cthulhu coming through, almost the impact it has. You could kind of do something like that if you wanted to. If you wanted to tease the big thing for the third season.
Yeah, I could see that. So many possibilities, and I think when we get to the end of the finale and we sit here and talk for probably a good 10 minutes now just about what season 2 and beyond could be, it's a good sign that we actually really care about everything we just saw and that we're invested.
It says a lot about how how positive we are about all this stuff going forward, and all this stuff we've just got. There's this you could do, there's that you could do. Yet I stand by the fact that I think this is one of the most disappointing episodes of the season for me. In that it's not a bad episode, but it was the most. This is a TV episode. Yet here I still am going, I can't wait for all this stuff that it's going to do. This is all potentially really exciting things, and I still, it had a satisfying ending despite my disappointment. It's impressive that in spite of that, it can still leave me in this very positive state.
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word disappointment by any means. I was too basically I was too thrilled by everything going on as everything was ramping up. I was too worried for characters' fates. I was too engrossed in the story to even be remotely. I agree with the sort of the if you look at it from the as a whole perspective and go, okay, yes, it's the least unique episode and it's maybe not got the unique flair that this one episode does or that episode does, but at no point in the episode was I thinking, oh, this is just a TV finale. Like, I was too busy actually caring about everything that was happening. And maybe it is doing pretty simple and normal things that a TV finale does, but as it was playing out, like, because I cared so much about these characters, because they've earned all of this empathy and all this feeling for each one of them, the moments where Tick is reacting to seeing his mother in this, mystical world, the moments where Letty is watching him bleed out from his arms and it's just pouring down blood, these moments really hit. They hit hard.
Oh, they did. And I think I will say I did feel that, that moment, it's a TV finale in the episode. And the moment that broke me was when everyone was just fighting the crowd, and I felt that was the moment that kind of broke the immersion for me. Up till that point, I was completely in it, and afterwards, I'm still back in. I still like all the beats, but that just the spell was broken just for that moment, and I couldn't kind of get that out of my head afterwards. So that's why I say for me, there was just a disappointing factor, despite how much I like everything in it.
I mean, I'll give you that scene, because that scene when it was like a fight scene with like the three of them like fending off like all these people, I felt like it should have been played more like just a horror thing where they were being dragged away and like try to fight back, but it was kind of futile. It kind of felt
running,
like it was being played a little bit more like it was actually like, like a superhero show where like they were fighting back and getting punches and kicks in.
It almost felt like that. I think it was Arrow season 2, when they're all everyone got juiced up on the magic Deathstroke drug, and there was just a scene in a tunnel with the everyone coming down at the group like that, and just whatever the way you just described it, the Zoo Hero show, I just got a flashback to that exact scene, and it's kind of framed kind of similarly, I think, in my memory anyway, and that's not a favourable comparison, and I almost feel bad for comparing this show to that there, but just that's what popped into my head when you said that.
You should feel bad for comparing any show to that show, but that's yeah. I think it's commendable what this show kind of is in a lot of ways, and not just because the issues that it tackles, the fact that it has a primarily black main cast and it tackles these racist issues in this especially racist time period. I mean, all time periods are racist, but what we think of is this Jim Crow era, America, and I mean, that's been there since episode 1. But I think even just looking at it as a TV show, removing it from that, it's got all those elements. But then on top of that, I think the fact that it somehow managed to be like this really episodic, each episode with a focus, and I'd say like 7, maybe 8 out of the 10 episodes feel like they're really sort of distinct and unique. And then there's maybe a couple that are more there to just sort of set the next things up, or the finale's case, wrapping everything up.
It is a real talent to have a very serialized show like this and have every episode feel as distinct as they do. There are wonderful shows that are very serialized that cannot pull this off. There are shows that are probably better than this that don't pull that feeling off.
But at the same time, despite all that episodic thing that I'm talking about, they still build a story over the course of the season, and more importantly, they build the characters and have the characters grow and give us like different aspects to them, so we care about them, we care about their relationships with each other, to the point where when I got to the end, I was so rooting for these characters, I was so invested in these characters, and I was so worried about the villain getting her way, because she might have tricked them, and she did trick them just in a different way that I was expecting, which fair play. And the funny thing is that the way she did trick them, I should have not that I should have predicted it, but I would have been able to predict it if I had happened to have thought of it. It was there.
All the pieces were there.
The pieces were there.
And I think that's what I like about it as well, is that you're expecting a trick somehow, because your brain is inherently aware this is a story. Mm-hmm. So you're trying to work through the pieces as much as you want to sit there and enjoy it. Your brain is trying to figure it out. It always is. And you're there going, so where's the catch? What am I missing? And it's very possible you could have figured it out. And I'm sure lots of viewers did, because the pieces were there. And if your brain just happened to connect it in the right way, there's no reason why you couldn't have got to this. But the fact that there were multiple different things that it could have done is what is impressive again, where it could have done this, could have done that, and all of them would have been satisfying angles in their own way. But it keeps you on your toes a little bit, I guess, and it's satisfying whichever way it goes because of that.
Yeah. And that was a phenomenal season. It's a hell of a debut, and I really hope we get some more. So that is the season 1 finale of Lovecraft Country. So by all means, let us know what you thought in the comments for the episode and the season. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. It's super important on YouTube. Liking especially helps us out and helps keep all the content coming by promoting us to more people. YouTube's algorithm's a funny, fickle beast, and we have to tame it whatever way we can. But of course, you can support us with some money if you want over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses for your trouble. And again, that helps keep all the content coming. Catch us on Twitter at mail_fuzz for channel updates. But otherwise, that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any Cthulhu?